Thanks for joining me, everyone. I appreciate it. This is Liberty, and you're listening to LOP Radio, lunaticoutpost.com. Tonight we're speaking with Matthew Brownstein with the Starchild Project. Matthew is returning in a follow-up interview to give us some updates with the Starchild skull research and the recent launch of the Starchild Project fundraiser, which you can get more information on by checking out the website at starchildproject.com. I appreciate you talking with us, Matthew.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be back, especially at this moment in the Starchild Project's history.
Absolutely. I got the email from you, and I remember when we spoke last time in our previous interview, you were putting together a fundraiser to get some money together to hopefully further some of the DNA testing on the Starchild skull. Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, that's a big reason why we're talking again. It's exciting. In 1999, when the Starchild Project first came about, they had done about 2 years of research and really convinced themselves, those who were on the team at the time, and about 11 different medical experts that the Starchild skull, which I can explain for any new listeners, is not, according to those experts, just not human. And when you look at it, I'll let anybody who's taking a peek at it look at it, you pretty much get a sense of what that could be. Our general stance now is we're talking about a species that is just not human. And over 14 years, they've tried to basically find one investor, one person that can give the really millions of dollars that it takes to sequence DNA that is as old as the Starchild skull is. Since I came on board as the chief operating officer with a strong business background, I said, guys, we need to create this the way a true fundraiser would be. The Red Cross doesn't ask one person for X number of $1 million. They go out there and they raise the money. And we set up the infrastructure. We redid the entire website. You can check it out at starchildproject.com. And we started an entire crowdfunding campaign, which launches any day now. So any of your listeners at any moment could just go to starchildproject.com and start to see what they can contribute to literally being the first group of the people in the public in history that have proven another species. We can call that alien if we want. It mostly, the take now is we don't know what it is, and the evidence shows from both the mitochondrial and the nuclear DNA that this is not human.
I do think that it's pertinent information, and we've been seeing a lot of evidence on the forums lately is of an alternative history, and not so much the creationalist interpretation or the evolutionist interpretation, but kind of a mixture of both of them, and it seems to be coming from all angles. I think we're on the verge of a serious scientific breakthrough, and probably one of the most important times in our human history, where we're going to be finding out that there's a strong possibility of an alien intervention, and not necessarily like a gray or a reptilian or something like that, but possibly former humans from Earth that have been out traveling the stars and have come back, or any number of things like that. And I think that the work that Lloyd Pye has done and the work that you're continuing to do, and the hopefully the help and the volunteers that we get from the Lunatic Outpost Society, people will help further this agenda. So, in kind of, now you said this isn't necessarily alien from another planet. To get kind of from where we found the skull to where we're at now, where we're trying to do, the highly sophisticated genome testing and stuff on it. The skull was found in Mexico, and this was the early 19th century, I believe it happened.
Actually, it'd be the 20th century, so yeah, it was in the 1930s. There was a skull found by a young teenage girl in a mine tunnel next to another human female. The full skeletons, both were actually found. And the very short part of the story is after taking all of the bones out of the mine tunnel, all she was able to get back, she was from Texas visiting Mexico, all she was able to get back to the States were the two skulls, which we still have in our possession to this day, and the upper right jawbone of what we now call the Starchild skull. As far as the term alien, like what is this being, as I've been working more and more with the team, I've been consulting a lot with the person we now call our chief science operator or chief science officer. He works out of a genetics lab, and we still keep his name under wraps just to protect his professionalism. Yet we have a full lab that is completely ready to sequence the entire genome. The more I talk to him, and I've talked to Dr. Ted Robinson, who's one of the original experts that did research on the skull back in '99, and we just did a full online interview we should have on the new StarchildProject.com website relatively soon. And I actually was able to take replicas of the skulls and sit down with a neurosurgeon and just from a very scientific, down-to-earth point of view say, what do you think this is? Have you guys ever seen anything like this? Have you ever seen a human deformity like this? What is the DNA evidence telling us? And primarily from our chief geneticist who's on the team, he basically says, be careful about what you say from a scientific point of view. We can't say that it is alien. We'd have to have another, let's say, gray alien to lie down next to compare to, he said. And so I was playing skeptic left and right with these guys and wrote papers that I wanted Lloyd Pye to answer me back on and others on the team, the geneticist. I said, if I'm going to put all of my time and energy and money into proving what this is, I need to know that you guys believe it's simply not human. Then whatever we can say from the DNA, we'll go from there. But do you feel it's not human? Every answer and every response has been so authentic, which is basically, Matthew, I would not put my time, this much time into it if I didn't think it was the real deal. So what is the real deal? The only way we'll know, or get close to knowing, but literally will change history by doing so, is we do need to sequence the entire genome, which some people think is relatively easy. A human being is about 3.2 billion base pairs of DNA. And if you're living now, to be able to sequence that is relatively inexpensive. You could cut and swab the inside of your cheek. You could take a drop of your blood, send it off to a lab, and if you're still alive, you're going to be able to get a result back within a very short period of time for a very small amount of money, relatively, and you'd have your entire genome sequenced. When you talk about something like the Starchild skull, which is carbon dated at 900 years old, you're in the category of what's called ancient DNA. And so people have said, why is it taking so long? Why does it cost so much money? And I asked the team, and I really said, I need to know, is this legitimate? Is anybody in this for the money? And believe me, nobody's in it for the money on this one. They really are sitting on an actual bone skull, which is so different from human in basically every aspect of it that we realized we need to sequence the entire DNA. The process to do that, our general estimates right now, are about $2 to $3 million, and then we need to be able to film to document every step of it and then be able to put the film out to the public, which the expectation of doing that properly is about another $2 to $3 million. So estimates are anywhere from $5 to $7 million, and that's a lot of money. What they've been asking for years from any one person who had the money who was interested was to donate it, and it just never happened. So what we've launched is a whole new campaign based on legitimate, basic, and really crowd-based fundraising, so that anybody who's listening who just wants to donate $10, $20, $30 or more can actually do so, and can do it through the different crowdfunding campaigns that we're launching literally starting, I believe, tomorrow, I think.
Excellent. And people can find more information with that, and they can keep up by not only visiting StarchildProject.com, but there's also the ability to sign up and log in and get a membership, which I assume will also be accompanied by updates, frequent updates on the status of the fundraising project?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's going to go in stages. We can't ask for, let's say, $5 or $7 million up front. The first campaign, we're working to raise about $75,000, and what the money goes to is the genetics lab needs a contract, and we basically need to help them to get the machinery or the equipment in place, all the different testing systems in place, and an actual programmer to handle the amount of DNA we already have sequenced. We have huge amounts of data, so much so that our chief science officer said when he worked to plug it into the computers, it actually overloaded the computers. It's just so much information that we need to have the lab has the right equipment, but you basically have to kind of contract it or lease it. And then you have to have a programmer who's really working full time on it and be filming the entire process so everybody understands that nothing was messed with in any way. That's our first goal. Once we do that, then the plan is just to keep amping up on the publicity until enough people know and understand the significance of what the skull is, to say, I want to be a part of this. Basically, the whole theme is I need to know that if you take the time to look at the website, to look at the skull, to look at the x-rays, to read why it's not a human deformity, and then like you said before, anybody who's listening who's open to the concept of maybe human origins, it wasn't creation in the traditional biblical sense, it wasn't evolution in the traditional Darwinian sense, if there's any alien intervention at all, or anything outside the norm, honestly, even just the concept of other species on the planet like Bigfoot or the Cohen head skulls, like what are these other beings that are outside of the mainstream? And right now we're literally sitting on holding, have possession, this one skull unique to anything on the planet. No one has ever seen anything like it. And to have the genome of that literally will change history.
Well, I must admit that I'm happy to see that there's an organized effort to push and get past, have enough momentum to get past what's seemingly like a glass ceiling that the mass media tend to push down on any type of alternative research that doesn't play party line to the narrative that they've got going. And this is also another part that I wanted to point out here. When I was perusing your website earlier, it says it's staffed, and this is a quote, staffed by an entirely a staff of unpaid volunteers, which this is a non-profit type of organization that you're working with. This isn't like a money-making venture that you're trying to fundraise, right?
Exactly. I can tell you when I came on board, I had made a donation to the Starchild project, and Lloyd Pye, who is the major speaker of that, and we can talk about Lloyd and his status, where he's at with things now. But basically, when I first made a donation, he was kind enough to email me back directly, and I started to get to know him a little bit. We live relatively close, and he started to look into me and my background, and he said, I really think you're the kind of person who can help us to make this happen. And when we sat down and started talking, I realized this person has dedicated almost, at the time, about 14 years of his life, went through bankruptcy, has really absolutely, I put him up in his hotel when he came to visit. I paid for his dinner. And then I realized he has lived penny to penny, just getting by, really, actually, for some of the years, with friends of his literally paying for him to just be able to live just to keep this project going. Some really kind people who said, look, I'll give you a room and board. I believe in what you're doing. You keep doing it. There's not a single person on the team, including myself, and I've actually given thousands upon thousands of dollars now because I believe in this so much. So absolutely it's worth letting your listeners know. There's not a single person on the team that has made any money in this project. And as we move ahead, there's no intention to take any funds from what comes in for anything but this research. The concept of profiting on this in any way, afterwards, if you're sitting on what is proven to be, let's call it what it might be, an alien skull, it's probably worth some pretty serious money. And, I'd be honest, we'll all be happy to take a little bit of that for all of our hard work. But that's a reward for doing hard work, and it's really the secondary motivation to what we're doing. Can you imagine if you or any of your listeners, to be on the team for me right now, to be so intimately parted behind the scenes and to have held the actual skull, to know where the actual skull is, and just to sit there and to hold it and to think about it. If any of your listeners go to starchildproject.com and just look at a picture of the skull and forget about Wikipedia and forget about any of the skeptics out there, and then really re-look at what's on our new website, the DNA evidence, the explanations of the past DNA testing and why it wasn't accurate or conclusive, looking at all the physical anomalies. When you think about just what this is, I don't know. I mean, for me, and I think, while you and I are talking, it is so emotionally moving to think about, my God, what if this is what it really is? And if it's not, we'll all go back to our normal lives. But if it is what it is, we have proven something in our lifetimes that's never been proven before.
I agree with you. It's really exciting. Like I was saying before, there seems to be a distinctive something emerging from all of the research of all the people that we're seeing on the second stage, I guess, as it were, this being an alternative form of media. And a lot of the things that we're learning, we basically have to have a crash course in various forms of science. This form of science specifically, we need a crash course in genetics. And I wanted to comment that while going through your website, I think it'll be very interesting for people that aren't familiar with the subject matter to go through, because it's laid out in a very organized and informative way that'll help get through some of the science that'll be necessary to take an objective look at this. And in dealing with some of the skeptics, they tend to try to throw out some medical terms that maybe a researcher might not be familiar with. And if you can't, I forget what the old phrase is. If you can't confuse them with details, dazzle them with bullshit, something along those terms. Pardon my French, but and we get a lot of that. But when you look into the research, you see that the skeptics, their objections can be easily explained in a way that, I mean, you've been on all the major mainstream media, Fox, CBS, BBC, Discovery Channel, the History Channel, all those folks. What I think is interesting in learning about the information that's necessary to have an objective look at this is also being able to use that information to understand how there's other advantages that are going to come along with the DNA research that's being done. There's adding obscure puzzle pieces to the genome project, for instance. It seems to be some of the ways that this can help, like, future generations, and not necessarily just answer the question of is this a Starchild? Is this something that we're already familiar with? What can you tell us about the future benefits of some of the research that can be understood from further testing on the Starchild skull?
Sure, absolutely. When you get down to the concept of what would it be like to have an entire genome that is not part of the evolutionary line, that is actually what we're looking at now, is expected to really be anywhere from 25 to 90% different from human. And it's important to remember everything shares some of the same DNA. You and I right now share 50% of the same DNA as a banana. When they sequenced the Neanderthal genome, I believe it's about 97% human. So you look at some of the Starchild's DNA, and sure enough, the base pairs match up. And you say, okay, you could just look and say, oh, well, it's human. But like you said, the more people take the time, and it's a fascinating field. It wasn't my field. It's not my field. But I looked into it deep enough to convince myself, is this worth looking into? Can I write it off as a skeptic saying, well, maybe it's just a deformity, or maybe the DNA evidence is wrong? Yet I've done that for almost a year now, I mean, as a full-time member of the project. And I can say the DNA evidence is overwhelming for what it is. So when we are able to sequence the entire genome, we will really be sitting on a whole sequence of base pairs that doesn't match up with chimp or Neanderthal, or there's another species that was found that's considered pre-human called Denisova. Once that's there, the major thing I believe it will do for the human race is it's going to raise human consciousness in the sense that it's going to open minds to the concept that maybe we're not alone. Maybe there is a need for more research. We have the cone head skulls in Peru and all over the world. Like, let's sequence the DNA of those, and let's start to figure out not only was our history that we were taught all through high school and whatnot, maybe all of that was wrong, but I believe future generations, it's going to open their minds that when you're going through a basic education in, let's say, elementary school or middle school or high school, certainly I hope in higher education, they're going to be letting you know there are other valid theories now that are outside of the realm of traditional evolution. So that's one. We open the door to people being able to think way outside of the narrow-minded box we had. The other major thing, the Starchild skull is not only about two to three times lighter than an average human skull. Its cranial capacity is about one-third larger, and its bone is about one-third stronger. We're talking about a genetically superior species, a larger brain. And everything about it, to me, the more I've looked into it, is whatever this is, its genome is more advanced. But in the most basic sense, the bone is stronger. If we're able to, in our generation, or let's say in the next 5 or 10, 20 years, we might not be able to do it. Or like we were talking about, in the long term, if you, and the technology will be there, I believe, that if you're able to say what made this bone so light and so strong and be able to apply that to the human condition, I believe medical and pharmaceutical companies will be all over that once they have the technology to say, hey, how can we cure osteoporosis with this? Or any other number of, even let's say this was, and I don't believe it is, but let's say it was a human being. When you look at the skull and you look at all of the differences from what makes it clearly distinct from human, and then you look at how its genome is so vastly different than human, the question is, how could that have survived? Right? How could that have walked the planet with so many, you would think there'd be just mutations, but it can't be. The being clearly lived and ate and survived and functioned on this planet at least for a period of time, maybe off the planet for other periods of time. Yet it's going to open doors for science, for education, and honestly just for people to go into a museum, and this is one of our goals for the Starchild Project, not just the medical and opening people's minds benefit. I want somebody to be able to walk into a major museum, whichever one first wants to take it, and for you to be able to walk in and say, okay, there's human, there's what they call Neanderthal, and this is another species. I think that would be a glorious day, and hundreds of thousands of millions of people get to walk by, look at this skull that we now keep locked away very, very safely, and it should be in a public, where it should be in a museum, and the public really can see it. And, for a parent to point to a child, to tell their child and say, do you know, we really don't know what that is, but it's real. It's not human.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the composition of the skull is pretty much the same as teeth enamel, which gives it kind of its very high tensile strength and very low weight. The more I've looked into it, the Starchild Project has done their absolute best to be as clear and honest as possible. But certain things about considering it exactly like tooth enamel and looking at the exact structure of it or testing the exact strength is honestly a little bit, they were a tiny bit off. It's not that dismissed the project for me at all. But when I looked into it more and more, what I realized, I said, well, how do we really know it's that strong? And I would encourage people to go into it with that type of skeptical mindset, but not to brush it off just because you think you might have the answer. Because to me, I have studied this in depth, and while I found these guys did the best they could over 14-plus years to show every bit of evidence they had, there's times where, if you're really, really skeptical, you can try to pick holes in it. What I did when I looked at the strength, I realized there's actually many different types of strength. So like you said, there's tensile strength, there's compression strength,
about 5 different tests you would actually do to see how strong the bone is. And I said, have any of these been done? And the truth is, compression strength testing was done, and the only way in any of these tests to do them is you have to destroy the skull, or you have to destroy the piece that you're testing. So none of us on the team are willing to do anything more like that. The skull has already been cut into far too much from the DNA testing. But what we found was that the compression strength is definitely stronger, for sure. That's to a degree. That's what, it's not maybe, I think it was maybe 2 times stronger, but that's pretty significant. As far as the major reason they've considered it to be so strong was actually when they went to do the DNA testing, they used what's called a Dremel blade. It's meant to just cut right through bone to get the pieces you want. We fortunately have a skull, a companion skull, the female human skull, that was found next to the Starchild. When you cut into that, it cuts through the way you would expect, basically just like butter. When you cut through, or try to cut through the Starchild skull, it is incredibly strong. It's basically been explained like cutting through sheet metal. So it's a subjective kind of feeling for when somebody, and it's been done multiple times, has tried to cut into the bone. They actually had to use, instead of just a traditional stainless steel blade, they had to use a diamond-coated blade to get through. And that's pretty significant to say that this thing is strong. One of the first times in 2003 when some DNA testing was done, when the geneticist put the skull on the saw on the bone, it literally bounced off the first time. It was that strong. We also have in the skull, and my listeners can check out starchildproject.com to see more about it, there are these fibers inside the bone that when you cut through with the saw, they don't actually cut. These fibers have never been found in any other species on Earth. Nobody can tell us what these are. And the saw doesn't cut them. It kind of tears them out of the matrix of the bone. When you look, it looks like rebar in concrete, almost like, you'd say, like some type of, and this isn't the right word, obviously, but some type of like Kevlar reinforced bone. And you can only see that when you look really closely. Sometimes people have been skeptical to say, well, I looked and looked and looked, and I found some Tyrannosaurus fossilized bone that looks like it has these fibers. The difference, and there's lots of other things, and we cover this on the StarchildProject.com website, this isn't fossilized bones. There's nothing out there, and not a single expert has been able to tell us what these fibers are. So between its compression strength, its ability to resist the Dremel blade, the fibers in the bone, and when you look at when they went to sequence the DNA, there's chemicals used to actually break down the bone and to actually get the DNA out. In the comparative human skull, the companion skull we have with it, within 1 day those chemicals dissolve all the bone away. It took months, literally months, trying to extract the DNA using this one major chemical, EDTA, and it couldn't wear away the bone. Just that alone is mind-boggling. The scientists, were really floored. They found another detergent that's able to break down stone, and within a day, they were able to recover some of the DNA. But even with that, they couldn't find what's called the paternal or nuclear DNA to say actually who and what the father was. The current testing, our chief science officer, as we call him now, who is a PhD scientist fully capable of sequencing the DNA, he basically is telling us now both the DNA that's mitochondrial from the mother and the nuclear DNA that comes from the father and the mother. So basically the father and the mother's DNA is not human. But anyway, on the notion of strength, it's absolutely stronger. But yeah, why? Well, it will only be known once we have that full genome sequence.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, the rebar in the construction is a similar method. That's a common building technique to kind of intertwine different types of fiber to strengthen concrete and cement and things like that. So, and of course, we get all that information from nature. We're just recreating it in our methods. And as I was going back through Lloyd's previous body of work, that it seemed to be his common notion was what we can meet the skeptics and the naysayers on their ground with scientific information, and this is, well, a lot of the theories that we as critical thinkers examine and analyze are often theories because we're working on secondhand information and he said, she said type of stuff. We've actually got an anchor in reality in this project and having an actual piece of tangible evidence. And speaking about Lloyd, Matthew, can you give us an update? The last I heard, Lloyd was in Germany. Of course, he's got a form of cancer. Last I heard, he was in Germany getting some of the best treatment available in the world. What can you tell us about that?
The first thing I would love to be able to share, which is the really heartwarming side of this, is that Lloyd has had so many people who have followed his work for years, and when he said that he was sick and he didn't want to go through the traditional route because he's been alternative and he's going to fight this in an alternative way, and he is a fighter. If you listen to his YouTube videos, he was ready to fight this thing, excuse the pun, well, I would say fight to the death. He's still alive at this moment, but the prognosis honestly has been good. The heartwarming thing, though, is I want to say when he made a call out for the money he needed to go to Germany, to go to this clinic, his, I don't want to say followers, but the people who support his supporters, sent in thousands and thousands. He raised all the money he needed to go and have this treatment. It actually was very positive. We were all so excited. It had reduced. It was an aggressive lymphoma, a tumor in his lower abdomen, and it was reduced down to the size of an olive, and everybody was very excited. He went back to England and spent a little time there to rest and recover and to see how the treatment unfolded. Unfortunately, the bad news is it grew back aggressively to its full size, which in some ways can be good news because that means you can shrink it again using aggressive chemotherapy. However, I believe, is my understanding now, is Lloyd's choice is not to do that. He's basically been doing different alternative treatments. And in all of our team's email correspondences lately, Lloyd has really been out of the loop, unfortunately. So really, and I hope to hear some good news, but the prognosis is really not looking good, unfortunately.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, Matthew. That's very disappointing. Lloyd has been fighting the good fight for decades now. Some of his early work is what got me involved in the alternative research field, and obviously it's what's got you involved in this project. Our thoughts, of course, are with Lloyd and his family, and I assume that if someone signs up at starchildproject.com, then there'll be some updates regarding Lloyd's health.
The best thing to do would be to go to his personal Facebook blog. He's been updating every step of the detail, every detail of what he's been going through. What we needed to do, those of us on the team, and we're a relatively small team working behind the scenes to make this happen, is if you sign up for the e-newsletter on the website, you'll be getting emails directly from the Starchild project now, not directly from Lloyd. And the website really isn't meant to update his health anymore. In many ways, we had to kind of take over the project. He's really not been in a physical or mental health state right now to do what needs to be done. So, kind of my promise to him and to some of the other members of our team, we're a couple of days ago ready to launch our first major crowdfunding campaign. We're ready to tell the public, go ahead, it's time to sign up. And I actually said, I think we need more publicity first. I really want to get more out there. And they were basically one of the reasons why we're pushing so hard right now at the time that you and I are speaking is I want Lloyd in his lifetime, however long that will be, to at least know that nobody's dropping the ball here, that all the effort he put into this, that we're not letting him down. And that's my personal one human being commitment to another, to say, I won't let you down. I see what you've been trying to do. I see the importance of it. I'm going to stand behind you. So we decided, let's just launch full force and let Lloyd, for as long as he lives, get to see we're doing this. And if he's back on the lecture circuit, I will be thrilled. But either way, I know I want in our lifetimes, and ideally in Lloyd's lifetime, for him to see this project come to fruition. It will probably take another 2 to 3 years, even once we sequence the entire genome, for multiple other scientists to validate the evidence and for scientific method to do what it does, to keep testing over and over until you can say, all right, this is no longer theory. We are considering this fact that this genome is absolutely not human. I just want Lloyd to know that we are doing everything we can to make that happen now, and that's, wishing him all the best for his health. It's bigger than him, and he knows that. When I said to him, can I help you financially with your health? He said, no, just do everything to get the Starchild project genome sequenced, and that was it. And so to me, I was already motivated, but now that I know that Lloyd, who pretty much got us all to this point, is right now fighting for his life, I am beyond honored to be putting out the call to really say to the public, and not saying it's money that goes to us, we made that clear, that this is a moment where anybody who's been in the field of alternative knowledge, alternative therapies, who are open to this type of concept, to go to starchildproject.com, look for our current crowdfunding campaign to be part of it. And what's really amazing, what we've done is with crowdfunding, different sites that we use, they require that we give what are called perks. So we have different ways. If you donate $3, we say you get a nice warm fuzzy feeling. If you donate anything above that, there's different rewards that are given back to the person who donates, from as simple as having your name sponsoring a base pair. So you know how you can sponsor a star, kind of put your name on a star? Mm-hmm. We came up with the idea that, say, for every, I don't know the exact numbers right now, but you'll be able to see it on the website, for every base pair that you sponsor for X number of dollars, your name goes there, and your name can actually go onto the website saying, I was part of making this history. Beyond that, we're actually sending out certificates for people with base pair sequence numbers with an official Starchild seal. And then beyond that, for larger donations, we have different type of replicas that we're sending out to people, including full-size lifelike replicas of the skull. So we have these plastic resin replicas that are smaller and not quite the same as what you get, like the replicas we use for our lecturing. Yet there are crystal versions of it that we have coming over, and block-encased crystal versions of it. So anyway, anybody who's open to contributing can know that we are working to also, and this is how crowdfunding works, to give something back to you, to say, we acknowledge that you were helping to make this happen. And this is it. This is literally the time. It's not waiting for one investor. It's saying that every single person who's been interested in this or hears about it or has a mildest amount of curiosity can make a very small donation, because we're putting this out to millions of people, and literally it could happen in a matter of months.
I agree, and the success in the past of separate crowdfunding campaigns have been just out of this world, especially considering the different things that they're funding, considering that you could possibly be funding a scientific breakthrough on the level of Galileo and some of his findings. It would seem to put some other, like, video games or somebody getting a song published on the second burner compared to what you could be doing. And it sounds like a great stocking stuffer for any of the critical thinking conspiracy theorists that might be looking for some special gifts for Christmas or something like that. Matthew, this is really impressive, and you're doing a lot of the tough work, and Lloyd really has helped substantially in the past, and he's so funny and compelling. I suggest that anybody that isn't familiar with Lloyd Pye's work go ahead and take a look at YouTube. I've noticed that just a quick rundown on the website. I build websites, and I think the one that you made is a joy to navigate. It's got a lot of good information. It's got it laid out well. It's got it by timeline, by subject matter. I suggest anyone listening check out starchildproject.com. You can also get involved in the project and keep tabs on how it's going by joining the website. There's you can register and get an account with them and keep up to date on different information. You can also donate to the project via PayPal. There's a button on the starchildproject.com website. kind of off to the right-hand side a little bit. They've got Facebook at facebook.com, Starchild Project, Twitter, Google+, YouTube. You've also, are you still selling the book, the Starchild Skull Genetic Enigma or Human Alien Hybrid? Is that book still for sale, man?
Mm-hmm. Yep, the book's actually right there on the home page, as well as Lloyd Pye's ebook, Starchild Skull Essentials. Both books are somewhat out of date, so those who are, just to be honest, those who are really interested, just keep tabs on the website. Are people working behind the scenes, are working to create a new page every week. We just have so much data that want to get out. So yeah, thank you for mentioning all the different ways your listeners can access, and just being in the newsletter is a great way to stay up to date with what's happening, and then if it feels right at a certain time to make whatever donation feels right. But the book is available. It really leads up to the concept of, could this be an alien-human hybrid, which is still a plausible hypothesis, yet the current genetic research, which is not in that book, actually is saying it's most likely not hybrid, at least the DNA from the father and the mother. If you go into the concept of the hybridization concept, then it's possible that you could have a concept of artificial insemination where the woman was impregnated, but that the mitochondrial and the nuclear DNA are not hers, as I understand, my limited ability to understand it. So there's many different theories on what it could be, but the books are available. However, they do only go up to a certain point in the history, so it's really best to follow the website and get on the e-newsletter to really stay up to date and to be sure, because what I say is not exactly the best way our geneticist says it. So everything that goes on the website is double-checked by him to be sure that it's accurate and that it's truly scientific and not just speculation.
Excellent. Well, I do appreciate you spending the evening with us and updating us on the Starchild project and letting us know how it's coming along. We're really on, I feel like we're on the cutting edge, like I said, of some incredible scientific breakthroughs, and I think that this is probably one of the leading projects that's going to help with the exposure of that information. I thank you very much for hanging out with us, Matthew.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So it's my pleasure.
All right, you guys go check out StarchildProject.com. Donate a little bit of money to the project if you have a chance. If you're a fan of Lloyd Pye, check out the website and get involved. Participate a little bit. Thanks a lot for listening to the show. This is LOP Radio for LunaticOutpost.com. Y'all have a pleasant evening.